Hello and welcome to this
Hey, it works.
GDC talk on Own the Race, Move Towards Excellence. My name is Shelton Lai Lam. I'm a software engineer at Mytona working on the Hublix Metaverse style project. I apologize I cannot be there in person today, but please feel free to contact me via LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to discuss the contents of this talk with you. I just want to put out a disclaimer that the findings from research and statements in this presentation is based on my personal opinion. The purpose of this talk is to introduce concepts and provoke discussion within your team or company. Owning the race. The race I'm referring to here is your career path, your career development, where you've started and where you may end. A question you should probably be asking yourself is, where am I in my career right now? How did I get here, and how many milestones are there behind me? The next question would be, where do I want to be in the next few years? And a better way to frame that can be, in what direction would I like to move in? What are the tools or the platforms or the genres I would like to work on? These are questions that you don't have to have answered all the time, but they are important to revisit as often as you need. The key point here is, whatever you do, don't stand still. Make sure that you're moving in a direction. Nothing you learn or use or do will ever be wasted. A key part of running a race is knowing what you're in for. Knowing the type of race will dictate how you train and how you run that race. For your career, I would suggest you plan for the long run. Always be mindful and be thinking about the long run. Set and create long-term goals as well as short-term goals. And the key part here is know how to pace yourself. If you pace yourself, or if the team paces itself in the wrong way, you can move too slowly and miss an opportunity. On the other hand, if you move too fast, there is a chance that with pressure you can cause yourself, or the team can cause itself, to burn out. And this is not good for sustainable long-term development. Part of your career and part of your journey in software will be affected by these concepts of ownership and responsibility. I'd like to ask you the questions of, who do you think is responsible for and who is the owner of these things listed below? When we talk about workflow, the software development life cycle, the code base, product quality, tasks, product delivery, it's not always easy to define who is the exact person that's the owner of such things. When we talk about responsibility, we may find these things written in someone's job description, or we may notice and see specific people getting blamed for when things don't go right, or when things come up and fixes are needed urgently. When we talk about responsibility for the workflow, for tasks, for product delivery, we'll probably be thinking on a managerial or operations level. When we're looking at something like the product quality and the code base, we can maybe start thinking about producers or designers or the lead testers. Maybe we can even start looking at the technical lead or the lead programmer. Now, before we just take all of those people and place them in the same boat of also being the owner of those things, let's look at your career path, your skills and your knowledge. The person responsible for your career or your skills or your knowledge, maybe that is someone in the company that's in charge of learning and development. Whether you have a person like this or not, I would encourage you to take ownership of your career path, of your skills and of your knowledge. After all, they do belong to you and you own them. What this means is, regardless of there being someone setting a path for you or encouraging you to take one, or putting up certain things that you need to add to your skills, or putting certain courses up for you to increase your knowledge. When you take ownership, you make moves in the direction of increasing your skills and your knowledge, regardless of there being someone else responsible for it. I would like to suggest that you can take ownership of things that you're not responsible for. It's possible for you to take ownership of the workflow or the code base or the product quality, things like the tasks or the product delivery, even when you're not responsible for it, even at the junior level. What I mean by this is change your thinking and your mentality on, well, if something breaks or if something isn't great, it's so-and-so's problem because they're responsible for it. When you start to take ownership of everything or as many things as you can, you start to think of ways of how to improve them, even when it's not technically your job to improve them. When you take extreme ownership, your team will take extreme ownership. When you make excuses and blame others, your team will make excuses and blame others. That is how leadership works. When you give your new people responsibility, when things go well, give them credit. This will encourage them to take more ownership in other areas. When things don't go well, take the blame and train them more. This will teach them that mistakes aren't the end of the world if they take ownership and learn from them. When I first started trying out road cycling, I always struggled going up hills, long steep hills. One day I rode with someone who was a national champion, an elite cyclist, and he was riding next to me, and he noticed how I was struggling, and he just started to very quickly instruct me on things I need to do differently and things I need to change. And I could feel an immediate difference with putting into practice some of these things. And over time, the more I practiced it, the better I got at it. And I started to change my mindset of whenever I see a long steep hill coming, I would look at it in terms of, okay, I get to rest my core or main or large muscle groups, and I get to recuperate some energy. Whereas before, the way I used to ride was the uphills were the things that drained me the most. Why I'm saying this is that there's 2 points to the story. One is you don't know what you don't know, and the other is knowledge sharing is invaluable in team environments. It's so important to knowledge share when significant findings are made, and it's so important to research and to keep looking for different ways or other ways to achieve something you are already doing or to implement something that you haven't yet implemented. There is something around trial and error that will always be required, but you cannot do it without research. You need a combination of researching, looking for variety in ways to achieve something, and when it comes to the experimenting, do a lot of repetition and practice and try different things and jot down the findings and share the knowledge among the team. There's an article around engineering excellence by Heming Fu that I came across. He talks about 4 pillars of engineering excellence. In craftsmanship, by having deep knowledge of what great software looks like, engineers are able to design and build systems that is flexible, maintainable, and testable. Good, strong coding practices, example code reviews, unit tests, also ensure that bad code doesn't get into the codebase. Effectiveness. By estimating costs, managing projects, and identifying risks well, the team is able to deliver projects on time and on budget, and at the same time keep taking steps forward, systematically reducing technical debt accumulated in the previous phase. Now, how does effectiveness look at the individual level? Do you execute commitments on time and on budget? Do you estimate your tasks accurately? Can you identify technical and project risks, isolate root causes? Can you use data to make decisions and analyze the impact and communicate these findings? Do you design and document your systems? Productivity. By ensuring engineers are not wasting their time on needless work and making the right investments in force multipliers, engineers are able to do more with less. CI/CD pipelines with good test coverage are a huge force multiplier. productivity at the individual level? Do you spend more time on things that matter? Do you set enough uninterrupted blocks of time to design, build, and test? Do you handle the most critical issues at hand first? Try to get things done right the first time. No hack is the best hack, as a friend of mine would say. Do you document, create your work and systems so that you don't have to be constantly bugged to support it? Happiness. Happy and happily engaged engineers are key to the success of any business that has software development by its engineers as its core. Do you take pride and satisfaction in your work? Is there a sense of ownership? Do you feel a part of the team and contribute to the success of the team? Do you agree with the technical direction of the team? Do you feel sufficiently intellectually challenged? Do you have enough creative outlets for your ideas? Do you feel sufficiently compensated? Do you feel sufficiently supported? Do you receive timely and actionable feedback? Is there growth and support for your career development? All of these things contribute towards the happiness of engineers. I'd encourage you to revisit these concepts around craftsmanship, effectiveness, productivity, and happiness with your team. As the knowledge and the skill sets of the individuals and as the team increase, this increases the team's power. It changes the speed at which you can do things. It also creates or opens up horizons for greater opportunities of where you can go, where you can climb to. It's a good place to be in. When we're talking about your breadth of knowledge and your depth of knowledge, you can start out in two different ways mostly. Fairly specialized in one thing, and you can continue in that direction. Or generalized and in need of specializing in something. If you would like to continue your career as a specialist, I would encourage you to still make moves towards being T-shaped rather than staying I-shaped in the long run. The greater the breadth of knowledge you have while maintaining your specialization will be key in increasing your employability, but also your effectiveness in a wider team environment. When you're generalized and very broad in your knowledge, make sure you specialize. Whether it's one or many things, you need specialization to give you an edge as well. With all of the technical skills that you can gain, I did this quick study of grabbing data from job listings and articles and ran a word cloud, and I was just surprised at the importance around communication, collaboration, and teamwork that came through. If you are progressing towards a senior and a leadership role, do not forget that what will get you there or what will keep you there is things around soft skills. Do spend time in increasing your ability and your capability in communication and teamwork. Now, goals are important, and goals are huge in pacing yourself and keeping your vision and your long run in your career. SMART goals is a system or a format where you define goals that are specific, that are measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. Long-term goals could be things like eyeing a certain promotion, a certain role, deploying and maintaining a particular product, looking at completing a course or certification. Maybe you're aiming at trying to finish top 5 in a national game jam, or even a certain number in an international one. Another way to look at long-term goals is constantly increasing your code snippets. Short-term goals could be things like your KPIs, key performance indicators. If you don't know what they are, please ask your manager. Something like how many pull requests per week do you make? How many commits you make might not be that accurate, they're easy to fudge, but how often you are actually closing tasks or creating pull requests for tasks. Those are things you can monitor and keep track of and see if you can get better at that. And also avoiding something like reopen tasks. Another short-term goal could be something like researching tech news and reporting back to the team. This will also give you the opportunity to increase your abilities as a communicator. You could also view short-term goals like things to keep you stimulated, like daily coding problems or lead coding. Work environment is important since we are often working in remote situations these days. Don't treat this as something that you don't think about. Your work environment can be used in such a way to inspire you, to remind you of a certain holiday that you might be planning, or a certain goal that you have in a car or that you might want to buy. Or it could just be used in a way to provoke your creativity, to spark your creativity, to keep your environment in a way that is uplifting to you. But sometimes you can use your environment in a way to help you stay focused, where you don't get distracted, where there is a minimalist approach. Either way, don't neglect it. Working in a messy environment can often leave your thoughts in disarray. Things around productivity, it's just, I've probably mentioned these before, but keeping track of certain performance indicators can be useful to you. As you revisit them on a weekly basis or a weekly review, you can notice where there are significant dips or drops and ask yourself why that is. And you can almost make it like a bit of a game or a challenge to yourself to see how you can increase this. As an example I made before, how many pull requests you are making per week, how many reopened tasks you are getting per week. Another thing that's important around productivity is schedule. Now, I cannot emphasize this enough. It is so important for you to schedule certain blocks of time in your calendar if you sometimes struggle to find what to focus on. You may be lucky and only get given one task at a time. You could be unlucky, and it's very common that you'll have multiple tasks and multiple of them are important. You will have to find a way to make time for everything, for the important ones and the non-important ones. Schedule certain times where it's uninterrupted, that you can just code and get things done. Even scheduling times for meetings where if you do need to talk to people, that avenue is there. Balance is something that is really hard in the workplace. Achieving balance, gaining balance, getting their work-life balance. It can be hard, but it doesn't need to be. And the key thing I want to say here around balance is you don't have to strive for an even split in work-life balance. Sometimes you have to realize that the few hours you may have for one particular thing, you just have to make sure that there is a higher quality over the quantity. Balance isn't something that you can always get to easily, even in your job in itself, but it's something that you should strive for, something that you should aim for. And part of using a scheduling system is a way for how to achieve this. If you have too many tasks and you're too busy, you will do something like neglecting your learning and development. Whereas to help towards movements towards balancing, you can schedule specific time slots where you research something to add to your learning and development. The last thing I would like to cover is imposter syndrome. Now, I don't have too much to say about this, but to define it, it is those moments when you feel like you don't know anything, where you feel like you are standing in a team or in a crowd and you feel like you're the only one that doesn't know how to do their job or what's going on. Usually this happens when you start a new role, not when you've been in one for a long while. But the thing I would like to say here is, look, it happens to everyone. How you deal with it is by talking about it with your team, talking about it with each other. A way how to deal with it that is most effective is this thing that I've heard someone call the cookie jar. Basically, it's you remembering all of your achievements. Maybe you have to write them down if there's a lot of them. Think about all the great things you've achieved, and sometimes you need to revisit those and remember that you are actually capable of learning and doing things that you set your mind to. In closing, I'd just like to say, never give up, strive for excellence, take ownership, Set your goals, move towards them, stay on the path. You got this. Thank you.